Alright, so I've debated on making this video for quite a while now, but I think I've come to the consensus that the pros outweigh the cons. I guess here we go. So a couple weeks ago, at the end of November, I flew out to Washington, D.C., where I auditioned for the US Navy Band. At the end of that day, I ended up being one of the 3 finalists, and although I didn't end up winning, I am super proud of how I did. I wanted to sit down and talk to you guys a little bit about what that process was like, just because as someone who's interested in auditioning for these bands going forward, it would have been nice to have something like this prior to auditioning. So the reason why I chose to audition this early, even though I'm still trying to get through my undergrad, is just so I can get to know what the process is like, so that later on down the road when I'm in my master's, my doctorate, and I take more of these auditions, I sort of, again, know what that process is like, but I have some time under my belt and really ready for one of these auditions when the time comes. I've heard that the lucky number is like your 3rd audition, is when you finally get one, even though it's not really luck going into these. So if I can start number 1 now, then maybe in my 3rd one in a year or 2, maybe I get that one, who knows. But again, going into this, it was just to get experience of doing it, and I just wanted to see what it was like. This audition was for the US Navy Band, which is one of the premier bands stationed up in DC. They announced this audition back in, I think, August, mid-August sometime, and they give you a packet full of like 16 or 18 excerpts. And for this specific audition, they allowed you to submit a pre-screen, which they required 3 specific excerpts. I think it was Rachmaninoff, Symphonic Dances, Candide Overture, the Bernstein, and then the 3rd one was Americans We, the Fillmore March. I was working on those ever since the packet came out, and I decided that I was gonna go. Whether you submit the pre-screen or not, you can still show up on the day at the end of November and audition. The pre-screen would just allow you to jump to the semifinal round during the live audition day. The live audition day consisted of 3 rounds: the preliminary live round, which anyone could show up to, the semifinal, and the final. So if you passed the pre-screen, you could instantly jump to the semifinal round. So the goal was just to submit the pre-screen, and even if I didn't pass it, I would still show up on the day in DC and audition. I figured that if I submitted the pre-screen, I would get somewhat of an indication whether I was playing the excerpts to a decent standard. And also, side note, Dr. Page was lovely in this process, and he let me play excerpts for him in every lesson. I would pick a few and just work through the packet with him. And anyways, I worked up mainly those 3 excerpts for about a month or 2. I think the pre-screen was due like November 1st, which was about 2.5 weeks before the actual audition. So it's a short window of time between when they tell you that you've passed or not, and then if you're going. So either way, I decided that I was going to show up. I ended up recording all of my pre-screen material all in one day, which wasn't very smart. It took me a few hours, which isn't very representative of how I actually play them. If I were to just hop behind a curtain and play them once, I sat there and waited until they were perfect, because I figured there was no point in submitting pre-screen unless they were perfect. Definitely for the future, I will do it over a few days or spend less time doing it, because again, if they're not perfect, it doesn't really matter. So I should be able to play them perfectly pretty quick and every time. Otherwise, it's obvious that I'm not fully prepared. So after I submitted the pre-screen, it's all audio and it's completely blind. They have no idea who you are. I recorded with a Zoom recorder. This thing does pretty good stereo audio. They don't require you to have anything like super fancy, but it was nice to have something that was representative of how I actually sound, rather than through a compressed iPhone. So I submitted that about November 1st or whenever it was, and about a week later I got an email saying that I had advanced to the semifinal round, which I'm super thankful for. It meant that I was doing certain things right, which I was happy to hear. And then that started my preparation for the live round once I got to DC. So for the next few weeks, Dr. Page was awesome, and he let me just work on excerpts. I put aside the solo rep, which I love solo rep, but the military band excerpts, I sort of love those even more. It's interesting only having like a set amount of measures and just like grinding them out and detailing to a crazy extent. I like the sort of math in that. A big 5-page, 10-page solo can sort of get overwhelming. So to sit down and only work on excerpts for 2 weeks, it was definitely the highlight of my semester, which to some people that sounds crazy, but I really enjoyed, like, every day. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I can take sort of some of what I learned from that week, put it into my solo playing and how I prepare solo rep. Nonetheless, I really enjoyed those 2 weeks where I sat down and just did excerpts for 2 weeks. My main goal for those 2 weeks was just to play every excerpt every day. It was more about consistency. I knew that over those 2 weeks, the excerpts weren't gonna get a mile better. I just wanted to detail them, fix any small issues that I was having, but overall, I just wanted to be able to consistently play them if I was just to sit down and rip them out. A few days there, I did show up cold and ask someone to go into a room with me and play them straight up, like call them for me. It was definitely humbling the first few days, but over those 2 weeks, I really worked on it. I got a few extra lessons during those few weeks where Dr. Page just called certain ones up and just had to have them ready. Once I finally got to DC, I really wasn't sure what to expect. This audition was all over one day, which I'd heard from other people who had taken auditions before. That's not always the case with other branches. Each branch does the auditions differently. It's not really like standardized. I'm trying to think of things that I didn't know before that now that I know, it's super helpful, but I guess I'll just keep talking through the process and we'll see what comes into my head. I really haven't planned out a ton for this video. I just sort of wanted to talk through the process so that people that were like me 2 months ago that knew nothing, hopefully now you know something. This is not to brag at all about how well I did in this audition. I didn't win. I did get pretty far, but again, this is supposed to be educational. I was scared to make this video because I knew that certain people would take this as like, oh, he's just posting this online to show that he made top 3 at the US Navy band audition. What a flex, blah, blah, blah. I've like seriously thought about making this video a lot. I talked to some other people and I think that it would be educational to share what that process was like. And also, I don't want to like gatekeep military band auditions. That's not at all. The more people that I show what these auditions are like, the more people are going to show up and maybe they'll beat me. It's like, if they beat me, then they totally deserve that. I think that military band is a very optimal career path, and I think more people need to know about it. Not that not enough people know about it. There were 65 people who showed up on the day who were very qualified saxophonists. Anyways, back to sort of that day. I showed up and I was greeted by multiple other band members. They were all in uniform and it was cool to see and meet them and talk to them. Like I said, there were 65 people who showed up to audition in the morning, and then I knew that there would probably be a couple people like me who advanced to the semifinal prior to that day just because they submitted a pre-screen. I didn't have to show up until about midday, about noon, 1 o'clock, but everyone else had to show up at different times in the morning. How it works is, at least for this audition, they took 10 people at a time. You'd go up to a practice room for about an hour, and then you'd get moved into sort of another holding office room just before your audition. In that office, you'd spend about 5 to 10 minutes just before the proctor took you into the audition room, which was on a stage, fortunately. Again, I wasn't sure what the audition room would be like. So when I got there, I was trying to talk to as many people who were going through that first initial round just to see what it was like. Because again, this was my first one, and a lot of these people that I was meeting knew a lot about what the process was like and had done 3 or 4 before. Thankful for all of those people who helped me out showing up for my first one. Everyone was super lovely. That was another thing that I wasn't surprised by, but for something that is super competitive and everyone's there to try and win one spot, the stakes are crazy and it's really life-changing if you win this job. For all of that, everyone was super nice and it was cool to meet everyone. And there were people that I already knew who were there, and it was cool to catch up with everyone. It's sort of like being at a mini NASA conference, just talking to everyone. I forgot to mention that these spots open up when someone retires from the band, and there's probably about 6 to 8 people in each band. There's different sides of the band, ceremonial versus concert. I don't know a whole lot about that, so I don't want to speak on that. There's probably about 6 to 8 people in each band, and when someone retires, that's when a spot opens up and they announce an audition and send out the packet, and only one person wins the job. It's not like a competition where you get a bronze or silver medal. So back to sort of how it works. They take 10 people at a time. Each one auditions, and then after that 10, the jury, the judges behind a blind curtain, who don't know anything about you. All they got to hear was your saxophone playing. They pick who out of the 10 they want to advance. There's not a set number of people they have to pick from each 10. They could pick no one. They could pick all 10. Who knows? So there were a few groups of the 65 split into 10 that no one advanced. And that's just how it goes. That's the interesting thing about this. It's not like one person has to get the job. There's been plenty of auditions in the past where no one wins and they end up holding an audition a few months later. Once they got through all 65, There were 14 people who they decided to go to the semifinal round. I think a few of those, 4 or 5, were from the pre-screening round like me. So there are 14 of us. They split it 7 and 7, did it the same sort of way. We drew sticks. I ended up being number 2. They took 7 of us up to the practice rooms. You go warm up. They give you the cuts, what excerpts they want to pick. They picked about 3, 4 excerpts, I think. And then there was some sight reading, which you don't know if you're going to get to the sight reading. That's all sort of dependent on how your excerpts go in the room. I went and warmed up, and then I went into the audition room. I'd asked the proctor, I was like, so are you gonna like give me the sight reading? Will it be on my stand? And he was like, well, if you get to the sight reading. I was like, ooh, if I get to the sight reading, that's scary. Luckily, my excerpts were good enough. They brought me over the sight reading. There was a march, and then there was actually a jazz chart, which I wasn't expecting. I'm not very fluent in jazz, so that was quite surprising. I fumbled my way through that and then finished that. I was super happy to just already be in the semifinal round. And again, my whole mindset going into this day was, if I can learn anything about the process, I've done well, and I have done everything that I would have wanted. So already being in the semifinal round was awesome. Once my first group of 7 was done, you go and sit at a conference room table, and we waited for like an hour for the jury to decide what they wanted. And I ended up being one of the 2 people to advance to the final round in my group of 7. There was one other person from the other group of 7, so there were 3 of us in the final round. And then the process happens again. One of the biggest things I learned was I needed to be ready to play sort of whenever. There wasn't like a set time, like, oh, you're going at 3:30. It was sort of, go up to a practice room. Whenever I come and get you, that's when you'll go to the stage. So you sort of have to be quick on your feet with how you're warming up and what all you're playing and how much time you have for each excerpt once you finally get a cut list. For the final round, there was a lot more music. I played some cuts of Creston, Sonata, and then a few excerpts. And then I ended up playing with one of the other band members, the Mozart duet. Again, once I was on that stage in finals, I was just happy to be there. I sort of like disassociated in the middle of that audition, that final round, just because I was like, this is crazy that I'm right here, standing here. Again, just being there, I was super thankful. That finished, and again, we sat there for about an hour, the 3 of us. You're super supportive of everyone else. Everyone's super supportive of you, and you're happy for any one of those 3 people to walk away with the job. It was for sure scary sitting at that table thinking like I could be one of the people out of these 3 to walk away with this job. After they decide which of the 3 they want, they'll go in and you do an interview with them. I obviously didn't make it to that part, but that day was really cool. Now that it's been a few weeks after the audition, I did end up receiving some feedback, which was super nice. It was very specific stuff for each excerpt. I'm very happy to have that feedback because going into these next few auditions that come up, that's going to be super helpful. In terms of the future, I do plan on taking the West Point band audition that is coming up. That's Tenor. That's pre-screen round coming up in February, and then the actual audition is in May if they decide to fly you out to that. So that's one of my big winter break projects, just to hopefully get some of those excerpts recorded. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you need to know about military auditions, even though I've only taken one. Just from that one, I learned a lot. And I think the biggest thing you can do is, if you're interested in doing it, is submit a pre-screen if you're interested. If you're able and fortunate enough, you should go out and take an audition, do it. That's the best way to gain experience. There's no time like the present. There's no point in waiting to see if maybe one day you'll be good enough. I think the worst thing you can tell yourself is, oh, I'll take one once I get better at the saxophone, once I get better at the trumpet, whatever it is. Go out and do it. You'll learn a lot from it, and I think you'll end up doing a lot better than you probably think. So yeah, it was a cool experience. I'm very thankful for all the people that helped me out throughout the process, and for all the people that were there helping me throughout the process. All of the band members, very thankful for them. We'll see how I do at the next one. It's sort of a crapshoot, especially between auditions. Just because I made finals at this last one doesn't mean I'll even advance to the pre-screen at the next one. That's just kind of how it goes. I hope this video was helpful. Again, this is not meant to brag whatsoever. I just wanted to share what that process was like for me and hopefully give you a little bit of insight about how military auditions work. Even though not all auditions are the same, hopefully this helps even just a little bit. Let me know down below if you have any questions about what the process was like, anything I may have forgotten. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm not sure how long it was gonna be. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.